Lock note means I'm the last one. So can we lock the doors? And we're not going to let anyone out until you all build an MCP server of your own. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, and I'm going to start my presentation. There we go. All right, now before I get started, I think we've all been sitting down for a little while. Let's all get up and do a few stretches. Stretch out your back, your arms, your legs. Guys, if you're sitting in the back there, would you mind just making your way over to the seats, just so when they take some footage or some photos of me, it'll look like my talk was, more popular and exciting. Try and look excited and interested and engaged as well. Come on, guys. Michael, you too. Eddie, up you come. Is there anyone back there? Yep. And make sure you sit in the front row as per the rules to better presentations. You've done enough stretching, Penny, but you can still sit down. All right. Who's excited to hear more about MCP?
We got to be talking about the yaks, the llamas.
Today we're talking about llamas, but you may see where we can fit the yaks in. By the way, are we doing any sort of giveaways for merch or anything today? I feel like we should be. There's a lot of giveaways at NDC.
You're the giveaway.
Right, I'm the giveaway. So my knowledge is about to be given away. Come on, guys, take a seat. Bunch up nice and close down the front. Look excited, look interested and engaged. All right, so my talk today, I'm going to kick it off. The subject is TinaCMS. Wait, no, it isn't. It's TinaMCP and the future of content. All right. So obviously, MCP is in the news recently. Latest big trend in AI. But this is TinaCON. So to make it relevant, we've built a TinaMCP that I'll be showing you shortly. So my name's Calum for today, or AKA Calum Simpson is my real name. AI enthusiast is the way I like to describe myself. There's a beautiful photo of me sort of transfigured into a llama form.
Fiona?
Fiona? I don't get it. Anyway, all right. Very, very funny. Yes, and so I've been talking about AI for a little while, ever since ChatGPT got released. That's when I sort of hopped on the bandwagon. My first AI user group was back in March of 2023. And actually, I've got a frame from that very user group with some of my long-term future predictions. One that I'm particularly proud of was this top one. Back then, by the way, we didn't have any of this sort of function calling or MCPs or anything like that. But the prediction was we're going to transform from an app-centric to a task-centric way of interacting with technology. So instead of having an app for every task that we're trying to do, we're going to have a generic assistant, and it's going to be capable of anything, any sort of task. And that's sort of what we get with MCP. Here's another one, future of the AI-powered internet. More on that later, but this diagram particularly reminded me a little bit of MCP. So I called it a GPT browser, GPT server, but I think I can claim copyright of the entire MCP protocol. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Tina, just to make sure it's relevant. We all right with the seating? Caleb, you want to sit there? Or oh, it's all right. You can. All good. Can anyone find Caleb a PowerPoint? All right. So current state of TinaCMS. Obviously, it's a small team. You might say it's a little bit underfunded compared to some of the bigger players. Who are some of the big players in the CMS space, would you say? WordPress, of course. What was that, Penny? Netlify. Yes, that's right. Good. Sanity, yes. Heard of them. Yes, all right. So all these big players, they've obviously got a lot of funding. Tina, on the other hand, small upstart, sort of pulling up by its boots. These aren't bootstraps, but you know what I mean. And so what I want to try and argue for today, or make an argument for, is why TinaCMS is well placed for the future of content. But I'm going to get there eventually with a bit of a roundabout way, going through some MCP stuff as well. So here's a bit of an agenda for you. We're going to start off with what and why of MCP. Obviously, my colleague Hajir gave us an awesome introduction, so I won't retread too much of that. We're going to talk about how, demo and next steps, and then the future of content. So let's get into it. Now, I did have a bit of a crowd work sort of thing to warm up. I was going to go around the room asking, what do you do for work? And then I was going to estimate how long until everyone's job is economically unviable. But I've been told by Adam not to do that because it may not be a good look. A bit on the nose. So anyway, we'll skip over that.
How long is your job now?
Not too long, I don't think. A couple of years, maybe.
That might do.
Yours will be the first to go. And that might have been why you told me not to do it. That's right. All right. So a bit of history for those who are interested in history. Back in June 2023 is when we first got tools or function calls in ChatGPT. Let me bring my browser across to this window. So function calling updates. Can everyone see that? I'll zoom in a bit. Function calling updates back in June 2023. This is the first time that we saw how we can actually do something using AI, right? Because before this, all we got out of it was text. We asked it a question or whatever, it generated a text response. But with function calling, we told it, hey, you can do this set of actions. And then every time it completes a message, you can say, oh, to complete that, I'm going to use one of the functions you've told me that I can use. So this really is sort of the first step on the journey to where we are now with MCP. The next step on that journey is custom GPTs. Who here has built a custom GPT or used a custom GPT? Oh, not too many people actually, less than half. Oh, a few more when I just started shaming them. That's right. So I think most people should have used custom GPTs by now. But back in November 2023 is when they came out. There was a lot of talk at the time about having sort of a marketplace of custom GPTs where you could sort of share revenue with OpenAI based on your subscription and all that sort of thing. Nothing really came of that. But I do think that the custom GPTs are sort of the next step on the way to MCPs where we are today. Because to build a custom GPT, basically what you would do is you'd give it a prompt and you would give it a set of tools. And so that was sort of combining on that previous step of giving it tools. Now we're giving it sort of a goal with our prompt. We're giving it a set of tools on how it can achieve that goal. And then it was up to that custom GPT to figure out how to put the tools together to reach the goal. And so really, MCP is just the next logical step in that progression, because what MCP is doing is it's taking the concept of a custom GPT, but it's putting it in your hands. Your hands is in developers' hands, right? Because you can basically run the custom GPT on your own machine. You can make it do whatever you want. You're not dependent on the OpenAI custom GPT server running somewhere off in the cloud in order to use it. So MCP is really just custom GPTs on steroids, I guess is one way to think about it, and locally as well, local steroids. And then this, I think, is really the most important step, is OpenAI joining MCP in April of this year, so it was only a month ago. The reason why this is such a big, important thing, because it sounds like you may be thinking, well, that's probably the least important thing, isn't it? It's just someone joining it. I would argue it's the most important thing, because if the industry sort of coalesces behind this protocol, like obviously it originally came from Anthropic, by the way, I didn't mention that, but you can see on the URL there. So Anthropic, the guys behind Claude, were the originators of MCP. OpenAI coming on board means it's gaining widespread adoption. The more adoption it gets, the more powerful it's going to be. Because if you can just have one standard that every single AI model talks to, then that's obviously the one that you want to use. Because there's no point having a standard like this if no one else is using it, right? So obviously we've had a bit of an introduction from Hajir about what it is. I wrote a LinkedIn article about what it is not too long ago. Who read my LinkedIn article? A couple of fans I've got out there. Awesome. But yeah, there's really only one. I've got some diagrams I'll talk to in a second, but there's really only one thing that you need to know based on that article. If I can find my mouse, I'll tell you what it is. That is basically we're shifting the workload from once per client to once per server. So in the old-fashioned way of doing things, when you want to integrate with an API, every time you integrate with an API, you need to write some code on your end to integrate with that API, right? That's on the client side. The client needs to have some piece of logic that says, all right, I'm going to go ahead and call this API, get the response, and do whatever with it. But with MCP, we're basically pushing all of that work from once per client onto once per server. So basically in MCP, the server or whoever is responsible for looking after the server is going to do one piece of work to produce an MCP server. And then anytime anyone wants to use it, all they have to do is plug into it. That's the only effort required, is basically configuring it. All the work is already done for us. And I'll talk to that with some diagrams in a minute. So why MCP? Simple setup. Okay, so like I just said, the people in charge of the servers, or in other words, the things that have all the tools, are the people who do the work. Us as clients, all we need to do is configure our local MCP client to integrate with those servers. So it's very, very easy to plug into as many MCP servers as you need. It's flexible and extensible by design, and I actually mean that in two different ways. So typically, when you integrate with an API, and you've got a certain version of API you're integrated with, if that API gets some new functionality and they release a new version, then you as the client have to go ahead and update. It may be as easy as updating a package, or it may be, reworking how you interact with that API, but you have to do something on your end to make sure you get the latest functionality from that API, right? The reason why MCP is cool, extensible by design, is if the MCP server updates, then assuming there's no config updates on your end, you don't actually have to do anything, right? You just automatically get all the latest list of tools, because the way it works is the client requests a list of tools, gets the list back, dynamically decides what it wants to do. So there's nothing at all hard-coded with specific tools, so it doesn't matter. If a new tool gets added, we're automatically going to get the new tool when next time we request a list of tools, and we're all good. So that's why it's extensible by design. What I mean by flexible is that it's so easy to plug in multiple MCP servers to your client that you can sort of combine different MCP servers together to sort of unlock new ways of doing things. And I'll give you some examples of how that could work with Tina later on. But you could imagine if you had a GitHub MCP and a MCP that creates blog posts for Tina, right? You could create the blog post with the Tina MCP, then you could commit it with the GitHub MCP, create the pull request, so on and so forth. So just as easy as that, just plug into two different MCPs, suddenly you've got a whole workflow there, and there could be all sorts of other ways you can use it as well. I'll get more into that later. And I guess that's that point there. So mixing and matching MCP combinations. So obviously, if you need more functionality, it's as easy as just adding another bit of config to tell it to do it, and that's all you have to do. Here's the diagram. So this is the old way of integrating with an API, right? So all these blue wires represent a piece of work that we're doing on the client side. So if we want to use all these API endpoints, we need to write a bit of code or a bit of logic or whatever in order to integrate with it. And then obviously if they add a new API endpoint, well, we don't have any wire connecting to it, so nothing's going to happen. And this is a new way. So the blue wire is what we do as a client. The yellow wire is what the server does, right? So we don't care what happens on that side of the MCP server. All we care about is our little plug there, right? And then if they've added another endpoint, the MCP server is going to add that new tool, But on the client side, our single blue wire is exactly the same. And that's the point I was making. When it runs, it requests a list of tools. Doesn't matter if there are new tools, it'll get them dynamically. And that's why it's so easy and cool. So who here is excited about MCPs based on that? Got to get the blood pumping, surely. A couple of naysayers out there. Anyway, all right. So let's review the ancient method very quickly, just to nail this point home. This is the old way of doing it. This is who here was at the AI 2-day workshop that I ran last year? Anyone? One person. Caleb, my best student in the audience. So the AI 2-day workshop was something we ran at SSW. And basically this example was a blog post generator, right? So everyone who came to the AI 2-day workshop went home with a custom blog, and they basically wired up an Azure function that would generate new blog posts every time it ran and commit them into GitHub and publish them with Next.js and all that sort of stuff. I'm sorry to say, Caleb, that everything that you learnt on that day is now obsolete, because we're going to replace it all with a very simple MCP. But obviously all that stuff that Caleb learnt on that day was writing code that directly interacts with, oops, not that one, directly interacts with the, in here, I think, directly interacts with the API. So all of this sort of direct code that interacts with APIs is replaced in MCP. And I will show you shortly. So here's a good example. Now, I'm proud to announce today, I haven't asked for permission from anyone, but I'm proudly announcing the release of the Tina MCP Server. Today is the grand unveiling of that. Open sourced. Thank you, please, guys. Keep it down, don't worry. So yes, I'm unveiling this. If you want it, you can grab it from my GitHub. Giving it away for free, totally open source. Very exciting times. So yes, basically what you can do with this, I will demo it later on if you're curious, but what you can do with this is generate blog posts with Tina as well. So yes, I'll give you more details on that later on. Moving on. So that was a little bit about what and why for MCP. Let's talk about how. First off, transports. So there are a few options for transports on MCP. A lot of people, when they hear about MCP and they hear about sort of terms like MCP client, MCP host, that sort of thing, a lot of people assume that that means the client is running on my machine, like a web browser, and the MCP server is running somewhere off in the cloud or something like a web server, right? That's typically how people think about it, but it's actually not quite right. MCP servers, at the moment, the most common way of running an MCP server is locally on your own machine. So it's basically, you run the client, you run the server. Obviously the LLM completions are still done, on the cloud on some sort of large language model. But you're actually running the server that is doing all the tool logic as well. So you run the client talks to your own machine where the server's running, the server decides what tools it uses and talks back to the client. All that's happening locally. We're just going to the cloud for the LLM completion step. So yeah, this most common way of doing it at the moment is standard input-output. That's the most common one today. It is the most common today. I don't think it's going to be the most common one forever, because obviously when you're running it locally, there's a limit to how much you can do. It's just that it's the easiest one to run. So I think that's why it's the most common one at the moment. Obviously, you can do it with HTTP and server sent events, so you can actually sort of get two-way communication going with the server. And you can implement custom transports as well. So you're not limited to those. You can define your own transport. It's sort of like an interface. As long as you implement the interface, you can sort of do the transport however you want. Now, how do we develop it? quite simple. There is if you're a C# developer like most of us are here at SSW, there is a .NET package, model context protocol. You need to include the pre-release flag because it is still in pre-release. And basically all you're going to do is configure your program.cs to, here's where we tell it to use the standard input output. Obviously, you could use a different method there if you wanted. And also with tools from assembly, sort of automatically scoops up all the tools that you've defined. You can also, like that comment says, specifically call out tool classes. And I'll show you what a tool class looks like in a minute. There's a specific link to the page, but yeah, you don't need to see that. So how do we develop it? Again, this is what we put on our class. So we've just got a regular C# class. We just tell it this is a MCP server tool type. And then this is what we do. We just need to add these decorators to our functions. These functions, each of the functions represents a tool. So we just say, all right, this is a tool. Here's our description of the tool. So obviously the text-based description of the tool is important because the client is going to decide which tool to use to solve a given problem based on this text-based description, right? If you've done any sort of custom GPT development, you'll know that it's exactly the same thing there. When you give a custom GPT a bunch of tools it can use, you need to describe, how all the tools work, what all the parameters are, what it returns, all that sort of thing. So that's basically all we're doing here. And so we describe the parameters and the function, and that's pretty much it. Now, if that sounds like too much to worry about, too difficult, there is another way to do it as well, and that's just simply to vibe code it. And that's what I did to make the Tina MCP, to be honest. I just spent a couple of hours, here was my prompt, so I sent it a link to the Model Context Protocol C# SDK. Now here is a golden tip, I think, for doing vibe coding. I think a bad way of vibe coding is just if I had said, create a Tina MCP. Because the problem with that is it's going to run off and start doing all sorts of unknown things, and there'll be so many steps in between my initial instruction and where it ends up that if something's gone wrong and it's veered off track somewhere, it's going to be impossible to track it down. So what I always do when I'm doing vibe coding, sort of like what Hajib sort of showed us before, is I'll tell it to give me a plan first. So basically it's going to output a step-by-step plan. Step 1, I'm going to do this, step 2, that, so on and so forth. And then I'm going to review that plan myself. Unfortunately, you still have to use your own brain a little bit. I'm going to review that plan myself, make sure that every step is something that I think is good or makes sense. Obviously, if it doesn't make sense or I need more information, I can still talk to it. I can ask it to amend its plan if it's doing something I don't agree with or whatever, or if I need more information, I'll ask for it. And so we'll have a bit of a back and forth first. And then once I'm all happy with what it gives me, then I'll tell it, all right, let's implement step 1. And then we see what comes out of step 1. If we're still all good, all right, now we do step 2 and so on. And I think if you do it that way, sort of a bit more of a controlled approach, you get much better results. People have told me they get very varied results with this sort of AI powered development. I think you get the worst results when you just expect it to read your mind and do everything that you want. And you get the best results when you sort of make sure everything that it's doing is something that you know exactly what and why it's doing it. And it's just putting in the grunt work for you, but you've done the thinking. So I think that's really the main discriminating factor between having a good and bad experience with vibe coding. Anyway, here's another tip. Oh, question, yes.
But
No, I haven't got it on my slides. I could probably find it. The problem was there was a bit of back and forth, and I didn't want to bore you with all the details. But yes, there was a lot of back and forth because it didn't know anything about MCP. I had to give it additional links, this and that. So it probably would have made for a good story. So maybe I should look at that for a V2. Thank you for your feedback. Next one. how to develop it. So this is a good tip for developing MCPs, this Model Context Protocol Inspector. So this is sort of a feature that's available with the official Model Context Protocol repo. Basically, you can run this, you point it at your MCP server that you're developing. So I'll zoom in for you there. And it's going to give you the ability to see all the tools that are available and test them out. So this way you can sort of test out the MCP that you're creating without actually doing it through a client. Because if you do it with the client, in order to test it, you need to come up with the right prompt to cause it to use that tool in the right way. And so obviously that can be a little bit annoying. Whereas this way you just directly say, all right, use this tool with this parameter, confirm that it works. So I highly recommend making use of that if you're going to do any development. Here is what it looked like when I ran it with the Tina MCP server. So you can see here we've got our list of tools. I run the tool, for example, listing the documents in the post collection. It's one of the tools available. I'll tell you more about how it works later. And we get back the list of tools, obviously. How to configure. So this is the part that you need to do if you want to use an MCP server with your client. So when you develop it, or at least when I develop mine, you'll have some environment variables, right? So these environment variables are going to be things like, a GitHub personal access token that you need to interact with GitHub. It could be anything else that is specific to your implementation that the MCP server needs in order to perform actions on your behalf. In the case of the Tina MCP, it just needs the path to your Tina project so that it knows where on your file system your Tina project is. So that's what the app settings look like in the C# code, and that corresponds over on the right to what the MCP client configuration looks like. Now I've redded out some secret stuff. I've got a Azure DevOps personal access token there and project, but I wanted to show you what it looks like having multiple MCP servers, right? So I'm making heavy use of this third-party Azure DevOps MCP server. It's really helpful for doing things like Scrum mastering because I can ask it to look up which tickets haven't been closed off since last week or something like that, and it'll come up with its own query, get the tickets from the Azure DevOps backlog, come back to me, and then give me a list of things I need to chase up for the next sprint review or whatever. So I think it's very useful. But yeah, the second one there is my Tina MCP server. And so you can see all you have to do is when you configure it, you just give it a value for each of the required environment variables. That's all you need to do on the server side. And then next time you chat to your MCP client, it's going to be able to query the list of tools from the servers you've configured it to and use them if they're appropriate to use, given your input. So quick recap on MCP features. I know we got a bit of an overview from Hajir. We've got resources. Resources are things that the server provides to the client. So in the case of the Tina MCP, resources could be things like existing posts. The reason why these can be provided to the client is in order to give it context, right? So if we can say, all right, here's a list of the posts you already have, when the client goes and says, I want to create a new post, it's not going to create an exact duplicate of one that already exists. That's a very simple example, but other things like that. So resources are things that the server provides to the client. Prompts are another thing. So if you've ever opened up a custom GPT or ChatGPT or whatever, you know how it typically gives you like 4 sample prompts, and then you can sort of click on one of them and it'll provide a good example of how you can use this custom GPT. So prompts work in basically a similar way to that. So the server can give to the client a selection of recommended prompts to help use it, and that can be a good way to assist getting a good experience for a client out of a given server. Tools are the main thing that we've talked about. So obviously each tool is just a thing you can use to do something, and it's up to the client to decide how it wants to use the tools. So obviously that's another thing coming from the server to the client. The sampling is an interesting one. So this is something that's in the model context protocol, but it's not fully supported by many of the available clients, including Claude Desktop. But basically what sampling is going the other way. So it's when the server requests information from the client. So that could be useful in the future for things like, I don't know, when you ask it to create a blog post with the Tina MCP, the server could decide, okay, in order to do this, I actually need more information from the client. So, typically when you talk to a large language model, it's sort of, or at least in an automated way, like if you're using an agent, you give it an instruction, it does a bunch of tools and gives you the result. But this is going to allow it to actually automatically query back to the client, and the client can automatically respond with additional information. So the server could say, all right, I need more information about what posts you already have, and it could be automatically provided rather than having the user to type in any response to that query. So obviously that's a bit more complex, so that's why it's not currently supported, but I think it's a very exciting feature that will come soon because it is defined in the protocol. All right, so next thing, I want to show you my Tina MCP. I've talked about it a lot. Now I will show you. So here is the MCP that I'm using. This is Claude Desktop. That is just one of several available MCP clients out there. So I'm currently running this sample Tina blog. I've just got a few articles in my blog here. And basically what I can do, I've already got this sort of test conversation here, but I'll show you what I can do with it. So I can ask it things like, what collections do I have in my Tina app? Okay. And then what it's going to do is use the tools that I've made available to it via the MCP. So here it's giving me this warning because it's the first time I've tried it today. It wants to use the list Tina collections tool. So I'll always allow that. You can see what the request it's making here. Obviously there's no input, so we're just listing collections, and we get a bunch of responses. So these are just the default collections that I got when I created the Tina starter project. Okay, cool. So we've got authors, global, pages, posts. Let's go with posts. What posts do I have? All right, and now we're going to look up what's in the post directory. So obviously in this case, we're using the list collection documents tool. And so now we're telling it, all right, I want to, the input is the posts, and I get back a list of posts that are in that collection. Cool. All right. And now I'm going to say, check what my posts format is. Then create a new one announcing the release of Tina MCP. At TinaCON. And to make it more interesting, let's use some more tools as well. Let's say search the web for relevant details to put in there, right? So now what we can do, what it can do for us is it's going to search the internet for relevant information. First it's going to look at the format of the post. So I guess I did say that first. Then it's hopefully going to search the internet. Here we go. So now we're searching the web for Tina MCP information. It looks like it doesn't know what MCP is, so it's got multi-content platform release, but that's all right for our demo. And now it is creating a post, and that's it. So you can see how easy you could sort of start generating content you can use this to search. You can use this to create pages or posts. And obviously, you could use this to integrate with other MCP servers as well. For example, if you yak shaved an issue into your backlog, requesting that a new post be created, you could have another MCP server that looks up the backlog, finds a PBI that needs doing. It could get the details from the PBI. It could do whatever it has to do in order to solve it, and then it could create the Tina post about it. Okay, cool. It has created the thing. Let's see if it shows up. I'll refresh this page. Hopefully it'll be there. What was the title? Oh, there it is. Announcing TinaCMS integration with Anthropic's model context protocol. There you go. So this post is what it just made. I guess it's got an image that didn't work. I could have integrated. Oh, it did work. Okay, cool. So obviously I could also integrate this with another MCP that generates a relevant image. At that point, it would be functionally equivalent to what Caleb built at the 2-day AI workshop, except a lot easier, because all I had to do was configure it to point to a couple of MCP servers. And so there you go. All this content obviously just got from searching the internet. Look, it's even got, so obviously this came from the internet. It says, join us at TinaCON 2025 at SSW Melbourne. So I didn't tell it any of those details. There you go. Pretty cool. And yes, so there's the stuff I just showed you where you can use our tools to do our things. Now, where can this go next? Obviously web search. I just showed you, you can use web search as well. So you could be doing research in order to generate a TinaCMS post. You could be integrating with GitHub. There is an official first-party GitHub MCP server, which is cool. So obviously if you need to look up your GitHub issues, if you want to commit your changes automatically, if you want to create a pull request and assign it to someone, you can do all that by talking to your MCP client, right? You no longer need to manually interact with anything at all. I know TinaCMS sort of makes it easy already with the user interface, but this is sort of another form factor entirely, is just doing it all via chat. Azure DevOps, obviously the same thing as GitHub conceptually. Your database. So imagine if you wanted to, release a monthly sales report as a public post. You could look up your sales database, what products have sold well this month, and then automatically generate, a post or an article or whatever about that. Same thing with your CRM. Maybe you want to identify customer segments and automatically generate a post for your most popular segments, and then tweak that post to make it appeal to those people. All sorts of things like that. I mean, I guess the sky's sort of the limit here. Any way you can sort of mix and match these MCPs, which is what I was talking about earlier on, it's up to you. And I think that's really what's so exciting about this whole stuff. All right. Last thing, before I get to that, who is now excited about MCP? Almost everyone. Maybe one person's no longer excited than they were before. Michael is up the back as well. That's good. Thank you, Michael. Let's talk about future of content. So I wanted to give you one other little demo, and I think this is sort of where we are headed. Who here has heard about Qwen 3? No one. You've heard about it? No. So no one's heard of Qwen 3. So Qwen 3, oh, Michael has. Okay. So Qwen 3 is a very exciting new model that has just been released. What is so exciting about it is powerful and local. But the one that I'm specifically calling out here is the 0.6B. So this is actually a really tiny model that you can run locally. So tiny, in fact, it can run on your mobile device. And it's basically at the level that ChatGPT was when it originally was released. And so I think from this, we can sort of tell, I mean, if you think about it, your brain uses a lot less electricity than your mobile phone, right? Your brain uses energy in order to have a thought, but it uses a very, very small amount of electricity compared to a large language model. So we can see conceptually it should be possible to have a thought and use a lot less electricity. And I think this is a trend that we're on. So this thing already runs on the phone. It's pretty smart. It's as smart as the original ChatGPT, I think. There is a URL. There is a QR code. And I'd invite everyone right now that this QR code is going to take you directly to the testing page. I'd invite everyone right now who wants to have a go, whip out your phone and scan it. And you can try chatting to this model right now. And when you chat to it, it'll look like you're talking to a model, a server, but you're actually going to be chatting to something that is running on your own device. And I think that is very cool. So I will open it here as well in case you don't have your phone. So what I'm going to do when I open that link, I'm going to go load model. So obviously it's running locally, so we need to download the model. Yep, takes a little while to download. Now we're ready. So now I can, ask it. It has a reasoning mode, by the way, as well, which is cool. I won't turn that on because that makes it a bit slower. But, you can ask it a question like this, and it's going to give you a response. And sure, it is a little bit slower than, the latest models, but it's pretty good for what it is. And this is running on my machine right now. If you're doing it on your phone, it's running on your phone. And I think that's really cool. And I think this is sort of where we're headed, is more and more powerful models capable of running on everyday consumer devices. And that's really going to make a big difference in the world of CMS. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, I'm not going to actually test this because I haven't been to high school for a while, but I assume it's doing the right thing. I don't know if anyone has any idea. Do you guys know? No one knows. Okay, well, I guess all our brains are already sort of switched off and we all just do whatever AI tells us. So the answer is 1 or 2. Is that right? 1 squared minus 3 plus 2 equals 0. That's right? Yeah. Or 2. 2 squared is 4 minus 6 is minus 2 plus 2 is 0. Yeah, that's right. There you go. So I worked that out. That was running on my laptop. It could have been running on your phone as well. So that's very cool. And so, yeah, that's the latest and greatest local model. That is super tiny. Very exciting. So given this trend of where we're going, I think that can lead us to some sort of ideas about what the future of content is. First thing I see is an inversion of responsibility of presentation. Now, that might sound like a mouthful of words. I just coined it then. I don't know if it's going to take off. But what I mean by that is basically at the moment, when you browse the internet, for example, the server that gives you your page, the HTML and CSS and whatever to render, is in charge of how it represents that content for you as the browser, right? I think as these local models get more and more powerful, it's going to be up to a local browser to decide how to present the data. So all the server is going to give you is the raw data. And then the local browser is going to render it in such a way that makes sense given the intent of the user who is browsing the internet. So it could grab some data from a variety of different sources, mash it up together, and then present it in a sort of a custom report. And it'll do all that in the same time that it takes now to load up and render an HTML web page. I think that's sort of, pretty obviously where we're headed eventually. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but soon. And I think for this reason, a Git-based markdown formatted data is AI ready, right? If you can have your source of truth be markdown formatted content already in Git, so it's easily available with version control and history, it makes a lot of sense as a AI ready data source of the future. And in fact, I'll call back to what I said at the start. So if you remember, I showed you this from my talk 2 years ago. This is sort of what I had in mind back then, in fact. So I know I called it GPT browser, or maybe GPT was a bad term to use, but we were all talking about ChatGPT back then. But a browser reads data from sources. It generates a page based on the need of the user. The servers and apps inform, but don't enforce the layout, right? So it's up to the browser to decide how it wants to define the stuff. And there's my other thing. So yeah, I see that as the future, and for that reason, I think TinaCMS is a good thing to use to store your content, because you're just creating a GitHub repository or a Git-based repository or whatever with all the source markdown files. Obviously, for now, your Tina app is in charge of rendering it. Maybe not forever, but you're future ready. You're AI ready already, and that's a good place to be. So call back to this thing. Obviously, the TinaCMS, the current state, small team, far behind those big players we called out earlier, but very well positioned, I believe, to ride the wave into the future. And we'll see a TinaCMS rush at the last second. Thank you.